Putin built a stage to prove Russia was safe. Ukraine made the audience watch it burn. For 1 week every June, the Kremlin invites the world to St. Petersburg and tells it a single story: that the war is somewhere else. That Russia is open for business, stable, and untouched. They even gave the event a nickname meant to sound like a club the powerful belong to: Russia's Davos. This year, the message was confidence, on schedule. The forum would open in Putin's own hometown, the safest, most heavily protected city in the country. Proof, the Kremlin wanted the world to see, that the future could be sold while the war stayed far away. And then, almost on cue, black smoke began rising over that hometown. A city of more than 5 million people, the second largest in Russia, and the one place the Kremlin most needed to look calm. The drones that did it had flown from Ukraine. Not from across a contested border, from nearly 700 miles away. That is the distance from London to the middle of the Sahara. Ukraine reached across all of it and arrived exactly as Putin's guests were checking in. This was not a strike on a battlefield, it was a strike on a performance, and the timing was the weapon. The forum venue sits on the western edge of the city, glass and steel and polished slogans about Russia's future. About 9 miles away, at the port, that future caught fire. To reach it, the drones had crossed an enormous distance in the dark, low and slow over hundreds of miles of Russian territory, threading toward a coastline that was supposed to be untouchable. These are long-range, one-way attack drones, cheap by the standards of modern war, modest in speed, but patient, and built to fly until they find what they were sent for. They are not fast jets screaming across a border. They are something quieter and, for the Kremlin, far more unsettling. Machines that simply keep coming, hour after hour, until a fuel terminal on the Baltic appears in the camera and the screen goes white. A Ukrainian drone reached the St. Petersburg oil terminal, one of the major facilities feeding Russian fuel exports out into the Baltic, and set it ablaze. The plume that followed was wide enough to be tracked from orbit, a black column climbing over the skyline on the morning the Kremlin had reserved for confidence. But the oil terminal was only the first act. Across the bay sits Kronstadt, an island fortress in the Gulf of Finland, the historic seat of Russian naval glory, the base that for 3 centuries has meant the Baltic Fleet is home. And on that morning, a Ukrainian drone camera raced low across the water toward something tied up in dry dock there. A warship. Not at sea, not on patrol, pulled out of the water for repair, propped up and exposed, in the one place a fleet is supposed to be perfectly safe. The ship was the Boyki, a Stedegushchi-class corvette, a front-line surface combatant built to carry guided missiles and screen the fleet. Roughly 2,000 tons of warship designed to be a hunter, filmed from above by the thing hunting it. And Ukraine did not just claim the hit, it published it. Its drone forces released the footage, a camera bearing down on the Boyki as it sat in the dry dock at Kronstadt, the strike captured on video for the world to replay. A warship caught on camera being attacked inside its own home port, the single most humiliating image a navy can hand its enemy. Reuters confirmed the location and the model of the vessel. It could not independently verify how badly the Boyki was damaged. The smoke from the oil terminal is real and photographed. The full fate of the corvette is not yet confirmed. And it almost does not matter, because the damage that mattered most that morning was never going to be measured in tons of steel. Across the city, the machinery of a confident host began to seize up. Scores of flights at the city's airport were delayed or diverted. And then authorities did something that told you exactly how rattled they were. They cut cell phone internet across the area to keep more drones from finding their way in. Think about that image. The forum that exists to advertise a modern, connected, open Russia had to switch off the internet to defend itself. To understand why a single morning of smoke rattled the Kremlin more than a bad week on the actual front line, you have to understand what the St. Petersburg Forum is actually for. It is not really an economic conference. It is a stage. Since long before the war, the Kremlin has used this event to project a specific message: that Russia is a serious global player, that money still flows in, that the world still wants a seat at the table. After 2022, most Western governments and major Western companies stopped coming. But the Kremlin kept holding the forum anyway because the performance still had value at home. It told ordinary Russians, life goes on, the elite is calm, the war is contained. This year, the regime had assembled the whole production again, and the plan, on paper, was the same as always. Fill the halls, manage the cameras, control the story. And that is precisely the flaw Ukraine reached into, because a prestige event has a hidden weakness that an ordinary military target does not. The leader invites the world to look. He concentrates the cameras, the delegations, the global attention into one place and 1 week, on purpose. He builds the spotlight himself. And once that spotlight exists, anyone who can put something into the frame controls part of the story. This is the doctrine worth naming, because it is what this strike actually was. Call it showcase disruption, and its logic is simple. You don't have to destroy the theater. You only have to interrupt the performance while the audience is watching. Ukraine did not pick these targets at random. It picked targets that speak 2 languages at once. The oil terminal speaks the language of money. Russia's war is funded, more than anything else, by what it pulls out of the ground and sells abroad. And for months, Ukraine has been hammering that sector deliberately. Refineries and terminals and export nodes, trying to choke the revenue that pays for the missiles. A burning fuel terminal on the Baltic is not just a fire, it is a strike on the war's bank account. And that campaign has started to leave a mark in places the Kremlin cannot spin. The day after the St. Petersburg strike, Russia's Deputy Prime Minister, Alexander Novak, the man who runs the country's energy machine, acknowledged that oil production had fallen and reached for the blandest possible excuse: unscheduled maintenance. Refineries do not go down for unscheduled maintenance in waves, all at once, in the middle of a war. The phrase is what a regime says when it does not want to say the word drones. The terminal that burned in St. Petersburg was one node in a Baltic export network that moves Russian fuel to the world, and the strike on it was a single, visible data point in a much longer graph that is bending the wrong way for Moscow. Kronstadt speaks a different language: prestige. It is an island fortress in the Gulf of Finland, and for 3 centuries it has been shorthand for Russian naval power. Hitting a warship there says something no balance sheet can. Even the fortress is reachable. Even the Navy's safest harbor is inside the range of a Ukrainian camera. And the timing fused the two into something larger than either. A fire at an oil terminal on an ordinary Tuesday is a news item that fades by evening. The same fire, on the morning Putin gathers the world to prove Russia is stable, becomes the backdrop of his own event. The smoke writes itself into the program he scheduled. That is the mechanism: narrative targeting. The object on the ground is the oil tank and the ship, but the real target is the story the regime invited the world to watch. Physical damage you can repair in weeks. Narrative damage, the image of black smoke behind a forum built to project calm, you cannot unbroadcast. And here's the part that proves it worked. Watch what the Kremlin did next. A regime that wanted to dismiss this as harmless noise would have shrugged. Instead, Moscow's spokesman promised retaliation and called it strategic, language you only reach for when something has actually landed. Our responses will be systemic in nature. You do not promise a systemic response to something that did not matter. The threat is a confession. Moscow treated the morning as strategically meaningful, which means it understood, better than anyone, that the story had slipped out of its hands. To be clear, none of this means Russia is collapsing. Its air defenses around the region were not idle. Russian forces said they shot down dozens of Ukrainian drones overnight, 59 by the count Leningrad authorities gave Reuters. Some of the swarm was stopped, but that is exactly the trap of a showcase. The story was never going to be the drones Russia caught. The story was always going to be the smoke from the ones it didn't. And now, pull back the lens. Because Ukraine was not only striking Russia that morning, it was striking Russia in front of an audience Putin had personally assembled. The forum was set to bring together roughly 20,000 people, delegations, investors, cameras, the exact crowd the Kremlin invited specifically to witness Russian resilience. They came to see a country that had put the war safely somewhere else, and instead, they watched the host city restrict the internet and the skyline turn black. Putin did not just lose a building to a fire. He lost the one thing the entire event existed to manufacture, the image of control, delivered to the precise people he most wanted to convince. And this is where the strike stops being an embarrassment and becomes a strategy. Because Ukraine is not burning these targets for the satisfaction of the fire, it is converting them into leverage. For most of this war, the ground front has barely moved. Russia took only around 82 square kilometers in the whole of May. When the front line freezes, a smaller army has two choices: bleed against it or go around it. Ukraine chose to go around it, past the trenches, into the rear, into the economy, into the prestige, into the one currency Russia cannot armor, its image of safety. And Ukraine's president said the quiet part out loud. He framed these deep strikes as the thing that lets Kyiv sit across a negotiating table as an equal rather than a supplicant, and warned that scaling them up was only a matter of time. Thank God that today we have security guarantees that allow us to end this war on equal footing with the Russians in any format of diplomacy. That is the real meaning of the smoke over St. Petersburg. It was not vandalism. It was a message addressed to the negotiating table, a demonstration performed in front of 20,000 witnesses that Ukraine can now choose the exact moment Putin can least afford to look weak, and make him look weak anyway. And that is what makes this so hard for Moscow to escape. Russia answers with mass strikes on Ukrainian cities. Those strikes give Ukraine its justification to reach deeper into Russia. Every terminal that burns squeezes the oil money that funds the next wave of missiles. Every humiliation at home raises the pressure to retaliate harder, which produces the next headline, the next burning node, the next reason for Kyiv to go further. Putin promised a systemic response. He is already trapped inside a system, and it is turning against him. Let's be honest about the limits. Russia is not defeated. One forum did not break its economy. The oil terminal can be rebuilt, the corvette's damage is not even fully confirmed, and Moscow can still launch the kind of mass attack on Ukrainian cities that it launched only days before this. More than 70 missiles, hundreds of drones, real casualties on the ground. None of that is in dispute. But Putin lost something this week that no repair crew can fix. The St. Petersburg Forum was built to prove a single idea, that Russia could do business while the war stayed safely somewhere else. For 1 week a year, this was the room where the war did not exist. Ukraine's drones arrived to deliver one sentence the Kremlin could not edit out of the broadcast. There is no somewhere else anymore. And the people who needed to hear it were already in the room. The delegations, the investors, the foreign cameras Putin invited to witness a confident, functioning Russia. They did not have to be told the war had arrived. They saw the smoke. They felt the airport close around them. They watched a host country switch off its own internet to keep the drones out. The forum that was supposed to advertise stability ended up advertising the opposite to exactly the audience the Kremlin most wanted to convince. Putin spent years building a stage to convince the world the war could not reach Russia's future. And as the curtain went up, Ukraine wrote itself into the program and proved the war had already reached Russia's present. So which one actually decides this war now? Russia's bigger arsenal or Ukraine's growing power to choose the exact moment Putin cannot afford to be seen bleeding? Tell me which side that math favors.